good morning or good afternoon, depending on when you're watching. We're winding down body systems and we're finishing up with the nervous system, sort of saving the best for last, or at least saving the biggest for last. The nervous system is huge. I'm not even going to get through the slideshow in one video. There are going to be two videos to get you through the nervous system. There's a lot to know. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot that I'm going to add to the slides as we go through. So listen carefully. Have your notes in front of you. Fast forward, pause, stop as you need. And here we go. The nervous system receives information about what's happening both inside and outside your body, and it directs the way in which your body responds to this information. So, two primary jobs: take in information and send out information. First, it's got to take in information not only from outside your body, but it takes in information from inside your body as well. Let me give you just a couple examples of each one. When it receives information from outside your body, well, that might be something like the bell going at the end of the period. Remember back when we used to have school and bells and stuff? When that bell goes, your body is receiving information from the outside environment. Similar, now going back way early in the unit to properties of living things, characteristics of living things. One of those characteristics of living things is that they respond to their environment. So our nervous system does that. When we receive information from outside of our body, we sometimes respond to that information. When the bell goes, when the sun comes up, some of you start to wake up when the sun comes up. Or when that scary man is chasing us down the street, well, your body is receiving information from outside. Now, there are examples of receiving information from inside your body as well. When your body starts to use up all of the nutrients that you have digested and absorbed through your small intestine, when you start to run out of energy, your blood sugar starts to drop. Your body responds to that information, the level of blood sugar. It's got sensors all over your body to detect the levels of different things in your blood. So when your blood sugar goes low, your body responds and it starts to liquidate or melt down other stores of energy that it can use to boost your blood sugar, and your body will make you hungry. The level of oxygen in your blood. When you start to run, when you start to exercise, your body is detecting that there is decreased level of oxygen in your blood, an increased level of carbon dioxide in your blood, so it does something about it. So there are lots of ways that your body responds to, receives information from both outside your body and receives information from inside your body as well. Now, there's a reason there's an up arrow beside receives, because that's half of the system, and we call it the ascending nervous system, because that system is bringing information up to the brain from anywhere, from inside the body or outside the body, it doesn't matter. It's called the ascending nervous pathway. We're going to get more into that in a minute. So once your brain receives all that information from either outside the body or from inside your body, it processes it and does something about it. So when it receives that information, it's going to direct the way in which your body responds to this information. So when a loud noise scares you in the middle of the night, your body receives that sound, receives that information, and then it directs the way in which your body responds to it. In other words, it's going to send some information back down to your adrenal gland to start releasing adrenaline to help you run or fight. When it receives the information that you're low on oxygen in your circulatory system. It's going to do something about that. It's going to send a message down to your diaphragm to start moving faster, to help you start breathing faster, bring in more air. It's going to activate a nerve signal to your heart muscle to help it beat faster. So it receives the information, that information is going up to the brain, and then it directs or tells your body, different parts of your body, to do something about it. Two different systems within the nervous system. We're going to take a look at both of them. First, we're going to take a look at this cell called the neuron. We've looked at individual cells before, the rods and cones inside the eye. The muscle cells in a muscle. Here's a special kind of cell. This is a nerve cell, and a nerve cell is called a neuron. It has a very specialized job. It acts very much like an extension cord. It carries an electrical signal. That's all it does, carries an electrical signal. The cells that carry information through your nervous system are called neurons, or nerve cells. They're a one-way directional electrical cord. They only carry electricity from the body of the nerve cell down the axon into the next one. That signal can't travel backwards. The message that a neuron carries is called a nerve impulse. And all it is a 1 or a 0, a signal or a no signal. It either fires or it doesn't. It can't fire in different colors. One individual cell can't fire with different strength. It just simply either sends the message or it doesn't. Now, when your brain puts together billions of either send the signal or didn't, well, it puts together a picture of what that signal means. So here are the parts of the neuron that you need to know. The axon is the long, skinny part, the long extension of a neuron's cell body that sends information to the next cell. The dendrite, small branches of a neuron that receive information from the previous cell. And the cell body is the big fat part. That's where the life-dependent functions of the cell take place. The part of the neuron that contains the organelles like the nucleus and the mitochondria. So if we look back quickly, the axon is the long extension that moves to the next one. The dendrite is where it picks up the signal from the previous neuron. And the cell body, that's the big round part right here that has the nucleus inside of it. This is what it actually looks like under the microscope. That drawing on the previous slide isn't that far off. There's the cell body it's picking up. There's the dendrites that innervate or attach to previous nerve cells. This is probably the axon from a previous nerve cell right there. And then that signal will travel down the axon to the next nerve cell. The information signals, which are electrical, travel along the axon in a hopping motion, allowing it to travel exceptionally fast throughout the body. It moves up to 400 kilometers an hour. Now, there's also a wrapping, an insulation on that axon. It's called myelin, and it's basically a microscopic, very thin layer of fat that protects the axon. Not only does it protect it, but it's an interesting phenomenon that electrical signal is not going to travel through the myelinated, or the part of the axon that's covered in the myelin. It's not going to travel through that. When it reaches a section that's myelinated, that signal is allowed to skip over that little myelin sausage-looking thing and reach the next node right here. And then it skips the next section of myelin and skips to the next node. So a couple things that the myelin sheath does for you. One, it insulates the nerve cells to prevent them from damage. We're going to look at a disease later that is caused by the breakdown of the myelin sheath. So it insulates and protects the neuron. It also helps that signal travel faster. So nerve cells that are myelinated will send signals faster than nerve cells that are not myelinated. Now keep in mind, your brain is just made up of, a couple trillion of these. That's all it is. Microscopic layers and layers and layers of these cells. So we want our brain to be protected, and we want those signals to travel quickly through our brain. And lots of your brain development happens as you are growing when you're very young, from age 0 to 5. So that's one of the reasons that it's important for younger children to actually have a diet that is a little higher in fat. Now, it's important that it's healthy fat, because your body needs some fat for the brain to develop normally. For your body to have enough fat left over at the end of the day to wrap up a couple of these, a couple trillion of these nerve cells with a layer of fat. That's basically what the myelin sheath is it's a layer of fat. So that's one of the reasons that it's important to have enough calories as your brain is growing, especially from ages 0 to 5. Now, there are lots of different ways that we can divide something in half. Even students in the classroom. We can split them into tall students and short students. We can divide them by dark hair color, light hair color. We can divide them by right-handed and left-handed. We're going to look at a couple of different ways that we can divide the nervous system in half and look at two parts separately. The first way we're going to divide it in half, and I have to say this very carefully, is that one half of the nervous system is called the CNS, or central nervous system. It simply includes the brain and the spinal cord, nothing outside of that. Brain, spinal cord. That's it. That's the central nervous system, or CNS. Brain, spinal cord. Everything else is called the PNS. Yes, I have to say that very carefully. You're learning about the PNS today. Stick with me. Focus. It stands for peripheral nervous system. So one of the ways we divide the nervous system in half is the central nervous system, made up of the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, or PNS, that's made up of everything else, the nerves that leave the spinal cord and the nerves that come back to the spinal cord. Also, all of the sensory neurons we're going to talk about in a minute. Your central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, this is what it does. It receives and interprets sensory information. So it brings in an information that it's sensing, again, sometimes from inside the body, sometimes from outside the body. And it coordinates activities. So anything you've got to think about, anything your brain has to process, whether it's moving, or sometimes muscle responses aren't actually moving. Something muscle responses might be in your muscle-lined intestines. Not movement or muscle movement that you see, but it still could be your brain activating those muscles. So your central nervous system receives and interprets sensory information, coordinates activities. So once you see the light turn red, it's your central nervous system that receives the information that goes to your eyeball, then your brain, and then it coordinates the activities. So your brain then tells you, move your foot from the gas to the brake pedal. Just a little bit of information about the human brain, very complex organ that allows us to think, move, feel, see, hear, taste, and smell. It controls our body, receives information, analyzes information, and stores information. Absolutely amazing how it works. It's just simply trillion, a trillion of different electrical connections. And somehow with those electrical connections, we store all of the things that we learn and know. Absolutely fascinating. You could study the brain for the rest of your life and the rest of the next generation, and we'll never run out of things to learn about the brain. Absolutely fascinating. The average human brain weighs about 3 pounds at birth. Sorry, the average human brain weighs about 3 pounds, but at birth it weighs less than a pound. As a child grows, the number of cells remain relatively stable, but the cells grow in size and the number of connections increase. The human brain reaches its full size at about 6 years of age. So that's why sort of from 0 to 5, it's important that, yeah, we get a little bit of fat in our diet to help build those nerve cells and build those connections. It's also important that the brain is properly stimulated to start learning from ages 0 to 5. Students, children that sit in front of a TV or a gaming device and don't learn or don't get the proper stimulation lose that critical opportunity to start building connections as their brain is growing. So when you have kids, make sure to get them outside, get them reading, expose them to music and the arts and math and science early. Now your peripheral nervous system, the other half, your favorite half because it's abbreviated PNS. The peripheral nervous system, nerves outside of the brain and spinal cord, it's simply their job to connect the central nervous system to the limbs and the organs. So when information needs to go up, it catches a ride on the peripheral nervous system. And when information needs to go down, it catches a ride on the peripheral nervous system. Now, here's where we're going to stop, quickly introducing 2 types of neurons. And the types of neurons are differentiated by the direction that they send information. In your peripheral, in your PNS, there are 2 types of neurons that help to decipher and respond to a stimulus. There are ascending neurons. Those are also called sensory neurons, and those 2 terms can be used interchangeable. They mean exactly the same thing. A sensory neuron is an ascending neuron. An ascending neuron is a sensory neuron. What that means is it's bringing information up to the brain. The other half are called motor neurons or descending neurons, and their job is to take information from the brain and send it down. Send it down to a muscle, send it down to an organ, send it down to, okay, I guess mostly a muscle or an organ. And that's where we're going to stop today. That's it. You're going to come back tomorrow or later in the week, and you'll get the second half of these notes. But I didn't want to overload you today with too much about the nervous system. We're going to finish it tomorrow. Work through a couple of assessment questions tomorrow, and I think you'll have the next video in 2 days. Wish you all happiness and health, and a good couple of minutes working through your note.